Today, we're sitting down with Sage, who has been walking the medicine path with the Shipibo tribe of the Amazon for the last nearly decade. Ayahuasca is something that a lot of people may have heard of or they'll come across in their seeking, healing, or awakening paths. So I wanted to bring her on, one, to hear her journey of how did you get to this? It's one of chronic Lyme and trauma that led to ayahuasca and ultimately healing. Her story it's great. I also wanted to bring her on for a sense of grounding and to really connect with the integrity that is required to work with this medicine. I share a little bit of my own experience with ayahuasca that unfortunately was in an environment and with people that I now understand were a bit out of integrity. Ayahuasca is something that may incite fear or confusion. Maybe people have never heard of it, and other people are absolutely obsessed with it. So Sage helps us ground in to the reality and to see the magnificence that it can be if it's your time to work with the medicine. So without further ado, let's get into it. Welcome, Sage.
Thank you, Carlyn. Such an honor to be here sharing a little bit of my own story and how the awakening path has transformed so much in my life.
I've gotten to know just a little bit of your story. I know that now you're walking the medicine path, and that is such a beautiful and unique one. And I would love to hear, how did you get into it? Who were you before? Has this interest or this lineage always been alive in your life, or was it something that you came to out of perhaps struggle?
Yeah, what a good question. And it's so interesting to look back that far. And just in my own mind, there, I was feeling there's kind of like the pre-awakening phase. And then there was the awakening trauma healing era phase. And now there's really life
Mm.
open and clear. And it's just a huge blessing to be able to look back on that whole journey with gratitude. Yeah, I can start towards the beginning. Growing up, like so many people on this path, I was always called an old soul. I think my kindergarten teacher called me that.
Uh-huh.
And I was always an artistic soul, interested in asking questions about why we're here. And over the years, I had an accumulation of trauma. And actually, I was bit by a tick when I was 7. I grew up on the East Coast. So I developed chronic Lyme disease at a really young age. So this had a lot of neurological effects in my life, from seizures and brain fog and memory loss to very intense psychiatric conditions. And I actually spent a lot of my adolescence in and out of psychiatric hospitals. And yeah, this phase of my life was just marked by so much pain and fear and a sense that I didn't belong. Like something was deeply wrong with me. And even though there's so much love surrounding me, I like couldn't quite touch that love. And over the years, I've been able to recognize just different conditions that kind of opened that. Chronic illness from Lyme disease is really interesting. My whole family had Lyme disease at some point and were bit by ticks, and I was the only one who was very sick. There were years where I had a really hard time getting out of bed, was out of school, and kind of this big question like, why all the time? Why am I sick? And I've been able to really understand compassionately this fear for living, this fear to be nourished by life.
It seems like Lyme can show up differently in a number of different people. I know I have some personal people in my life that have been affected by it, and it's can be devastating, physically devastating for a lot of people. Some people get bit and nothing happens. Other
Ugh.
people, they have the physical symptoms or the mental fatigue, but I hadn't yet heard of a psychological impact as well. Can you speak a little bit more on what that was like, how that presented?
Yeah. Yeah. There's, the whole mind, body, spirit connection has is making a resurgence, of course, but has largely been lost from Western medicine, and the whole psychoneuroimmunology connection is beginning to open again. And be researched. There's been a few studies just actually looking at teenage girls in psychiatric hospitals, and finding that 100% of them had Lyme disease. Johns Hopkins just did a study with psilocybin for Lyme disease, and the reduction in these chronic long-term symptoms, even months out afterwards, was greatly reduced. And everyone's case is so different. I've worked with a lot of people over the years as well who had very severe chronic Lyme disease. And what I can say about my own journey is that it had way more to do with the than a tick. Like
Uh-huh.
it's way deeper, and way deeper than anything physical. For me, it was, on one of the deepest levels, just my soul shaking me to awake. And first that, happened through trauma and kind of the terrain of my body having a higher disposition at that point to become chronically ill, and attachment trauma, and yeah, many pieces along the way that kind of created this perfect storm for my body and psyche to completely collapse. And looking back, of course, I'm so grateful for all of that. And something that I track a lot in my own work with people is this root system beyond what, the physical, even beyond the psychological, and beyond the spiritual layers that we might go through, like the ancestral healing and the past lives and all of that. This sense of belonging in ourselves, a sense of knowing who we are, and my own work of studying with different indigenous lineages, and primarily the Shipibo lineage of the Amazon, has really illuminated for me our loss of a cosmovision and how that has really impacted us in the modern world. So cosmovision is just how we feel our belonging in the cosmos, in the stars, this sense of like being on this rock, flying through space, in this body with this mind and this life. What am I doing? Just waking up, going to work 9 to 5 every day, and watching Netflix at night, and scrolling on social media? Or do I understand why I'm in this body doing these things that I'm doing, feeling these things that I'm feeling, having this experience of life? And we've lost this holding, this like embrace of the cosmos and knowing who we are. So much of the
Yeah.
world can't even see the stars at night, can't even feel the earth under their feet. There's so much pavement. So how are we really supposed to understand who we are as we're walking about in life?
Yeah. Did you feel a connection to the cosmos or anything deeper when you were younger? Did you have a concept of God, or was it more so just kind of overtaken by the trauma and then the Lyme and that whole circumstance of your life?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I grew up Roman Catholic, and so I always had an idea of God in my life and Jesus, and it never felt connected to me. There were times through religion where something would open and I could touch something deeper. But through a lot of that journey, I wouldn't say that I felt connected to God or spirit so much. Maybe through nature, through friendships, through different experiences when I could tap into deeper love. I could feel this cosmic deep element. But it wasn't until I began to work with ayahuasca and my path in a much more conscious way that I began to wake up first to energy
Mm.
and soul, and then to really begin to develop a relationship with what I call God, or the luminous emptiness, or our creator. And that, feeling that that's a two-way relationship, that it is a connection and a dynamic, and we're in communication. with God. So that came through later work, that like layer of awakening to that sense of holding in my own life.
How did you get there from Lyme and going in and out of psychiatric? What was that transition
I
like?
had a lot of different redirections, which I know is like kind of a common story every
Yeah.
time that something wasn't aligned. I would redirect and get sick again, or
Mm.
have some sort of crisis in my life that would send me crumbling. So after high school, I decided to take a gap year and I traveled around the world. And then I went off to college, and I didn't last 1 year at college before I completely crashed, because I was trying to really force myself into an identity of, yeah, just what my community at the time defined as successful. And I was in a really highly productive and competitive environment, and forcing myself out of this artist who I am and into, yeah, just someone trying to be an investment banker or something, just to make money. And it was
What a
at that point.
transition.
It was at that point that I was just so irrelevant, like for what my soul is here to do, that I went through some years of really deep suffering, and no matter what doctors I went to, whether they were Western or holistic or the top Lyme doctors in the world, nothing, um, things changed, but there was this identity of being sick that
Mm.
wouldn't leave. And because of that, I kept getting sicker and sicker. And ayahuasca came into my life in a really funny way. The same exact week, I'd never heard of ayahuasca before. Never heard of like anything that people take shamanically to heal. And I'd worked with psychedelics since I was 15. I didn't, I was recreationally, even though it touched me in very deep ways,
Yeah.
and saved my life at certain points. I didn't understand the doctoring that could happen through very precise, intentional, ceremonial work. And
Yeah. Can you go back to the psychedelics that you kind of encountered in high school? Is this just, kind of a standard high school kid who's experimenting, that sort of thing?
mhm, yeah, exactly. And because I was struggling so much as a teenager, the doorway to love and who I am was opened. This like window was opened into that. And then I would kind of come back into my life, and something in me would be changed and transformed, that I had no context whatsoever for what had just happened. I was, in a teenager surrounded by other people
Yeah.
who had no idea what happened. Um, and I could touch this love. I remember just like laying on the grass in the sun, and like, everything's okay because it's
Mm.
all love. And for someone who is suicidal, that awakening right there is incredibly precious. And I had that same type of awakening after a near death experience, and kind of all of these little breadcrumbs along the way. Yet the environment was still very sharp and restrictive for that type of blossoming to open in those times. And I think being a very sensitive child, the context wasn't there to help me understand and weave these experiences into my sense of self.
Yeah. So how would you describe your sensitivity?
It's easier to actually look back at it and describe, because when I was in it, it was a complete
Mm.
storm. So I was very emotionally reactive. I didn't have any sort of skills to regulate my emotions, and very sensitive in environments. I could always feel and perceive very deeply other people's energies, and especially their energies directed towards me in judgment. And I was very much tied, I had my sense of worth tied up in what other people think and perceive about me. The sensitivity became stronger and stronger as I was sick. It became physical sensitivities as well. I was down to eating like 3 foods at some point. I couldn't be around any sort of scents and smells. And even being in a social environment was inducing panic attacks. It was very hard to kind of come out of this really small bubble of safety I had created for myself. And yeah, it took a lot of years to unwind that.
Looking back, because we can have a whole different perspective on things when we look back, do you feel like that was you being open to the deeper nature of reality and the depth, the energetic depth of what was going on around you?
Absolutely. Yeah. And those of us who are hypersensitive, that gift is such an incredible blessing. I mean, I believe that to a certain level, all humans have the capacity to be open and sensitive and communicating in these ways with the unseen, whether it be other people's emotions or other planes of existence. And whether that is wielded as our medicine and as a gift, or whether it's really kind of a prison sentence and weaponized against ourselves, has a lot to do with our own development along the path. And
Yeah.
so my own training, just through meditation, through learning more and more the unconventional but really relatable spiritual world, learning about that and studying with the plants has really cleansed all of these organs of perception and has
Mm.
taught me how to actually wield this sensitivity as a gift. And it wasn't an easy path to arrive there.
Yeah, let's go towards that path. So you said that ayahuasca came to you in somewhat of an unexpected way. How did it come into your life?
Yeah, so I was by myself in Long Island working with a Lyme disease doctor there. And all day I would be in his office getting IVs for a few weeks at a time and then go back to this little lonely Airbnb. And something in me one day just decided to turn on Gaia TV. And I really feel that because I've gone back there a few times, like, what blessing was
Yeah.
that inspired me there? Um, there was this inner choice in that moment that I made on some level to choose healing and to like
Mm.
choose like really deeply, not just showing up and getting an IV and getting this physical treatment, but to choose the healing of my body and mind and spirit on a very, very deep level. I began connecting with some people's work. And this was like in the course of a few days, I saw something about ayahuasca. And then a few more times that same week, people brought up the word ayahuasca to me. And I had never heard of ayahuasca before. I'd never even come remotely close to talking about ayahuasca in a conversation. And so I had a neurological, condition and encephalitis from the autoimmunity that was raging in my body at the time. And so I was really scared, uh, even though I felt a call and I felt like something there could really help me. And, a part of me was like, we just needed to heal emotionally. The physical healing, like we've tried all of that, and it's not going to work unless I reach deeper inside. So I asked
Wow.
my doctor at the time, what do you think about me doing this thing, ayahuasca? And he looked at me and he said, I think you should do it. I think it would be okay for you. Yeah.
Whoa. Was this a Western doctor?
He is a Western MD, and he also is very much an unconventional
Okay.
Western MD. We were working with bioenergetics and bioresonance and homeopathics and a lot of holistic modalities. So um, clearly, the shamanic path in some form or another was a part of his own path, but yeah, just so much was weaving for me in those times. I had no idea of how I was being led and guided down this path. So I didn't tell anyone in my family. I asked my parents about it before, and they were like, "What? Are you crazy? You absolutely cannot do that." And yeah, I didn't tell anyone. And I went, and right away I did like 9 or 12 ceremonies, almost completely back to back, because the first few were really dark and challenging. But I think maybe the third one, I just decided I'm not sick anymore. And it took more years along the way for that to all come into manifestation in the physical. But that decision point of deciding not to be a victim, I recognized my mind is so powerful to make me this sick. I'm even beyond my mind. Like, I am so powerful to be sick. I'm just as powerful to decide to be well. And so I made a decision for wellness. And yeah, after that, I lived and worked at a retreat center in Costa Rica for some years, guiding retreats and really opening myself as an example for people of what's possible.
Yeah. What was that like moving? So that's a pretty big jump. You're living in the States,
Mhm.
and then you have your first experience with ayahuasca, which is 9 sittings, which is impressive. That's like true dedication. And did you just fall, I don't know if in love with it is the right term, but you just felt such transformation in it that you were like, this is what I want to give my life to?
Yeah, thanks for slowing down with that. I think, my first few ceremonies, I looked at the people who were helping. I was like, how can you make this your job? How could you ever do this more
Yeah.
than this one night? Because time felt endless and it felt so hard. And I was having so many exorcisms of my spirit and a very deep cleaning at that time that I could never imagine choosing this for my life. It became impossible to deny
Mm.
how much these plants were healing me, because my physical health began to shift in honestly a miraculous way, a way, I never felt that. I never thought I would be healed. I never thought that I could live without pain and exhaustion and even so many symptoms that I never even knew were symptoms began to disappear. Things I just assumed were, kind of normal things that everyone was walking around dealing with. These symptoms began to disappear, and I began to feel what it's like to feel clear in yourself and have energy and um, to have inspiration and joy in life. And so I went back and finished college after starting this journey, and I was part of a spiritual path called Santo Daime. And yeah, through this religion, I was able to go to school. And then a few times a month, we would come into ceremony. So I was kind of living this double life at the time, in this college student. And at the same time, going into these very deep and significant journeys. And then, at 9 a.m. the next day, being back in a finance class.
Wow. The contrast of that. What made you want to go back to college? Could you have just moved straight into working with the medicine, or did you feel like there was a purpose to have the college as well?
I'm really grateful that I finished, because it has opened a lot for me in my path, and a lot of understandings, and honestly a groundedness to everything that I do, and an ability to open my business. It was really my family that encouraged me to finish. And there was a knowing inside of me that even though a lot of it felt very superficial and not relevant to what I knew I was here to do in life, that there's something useful in there, and that I could trust myself to walk along that path, and to live in, you know, so often on the spiritual path, we think of like a division between the spiritual life and like mundane life. I was really shown right there that they're together,
Wow.
and that nothing that we do is outside of the path. And no one we interact with is not also a soul of light and beauty. And if we, really like separate the path so much, it's kind of back to that spiritual ego that thinks that, oh yeah, because I'm awakened, I'm so much better.
We see that a lot, I think, on the spiritual path. I know even for myself, when I had the first spiritual experiences, I was like, oh my gosh, I got so disconnected from humanity. And that's one thing that I really love about you is how grounded you feel. You are working with what I think is the most powerful plant on this planet. And to be able to traverse those realms while being so connected to humans and being able to guide humans is, um, it's tremendous and remarkable. And I really just honor your example.
Thank you so much. I would say the years I was living in Costa Rica, those were definitely a bit more new agey, ungrounded years and disconnected from what the rest of the world is experiencing, and even kind of demonizing some of the experience, just normal human experiences that we are here to experience.
What happens after you finish college?
Yeah, along the way, I was assisting one of my teachers at the time in retreat. So as I was finishing school, the path of study was very much a part of that. And after I finished college, I moved to Costa Rica, and I was working there for a few years. And honestly, in that time, it wasn't an aligned environment, and it wasn't an environment rooted in integrity. And I can see looking back how that was really important for me to go through and to understand, because it's really rampant in the plant medicine world. And I think even beyond the plant medicine world, it really opened me both to the energetic necessity of having a very clear path in the medicine world and a very clear path rooted in ancient traditions. And also being very clear that, the people who are mentors in my life are doing their own work on this path and are really in it for love and in it for truth and not in it for an ego validation.
How do you then go about finding what comes next?
Yeah, what comes next kind of merged with the timeline a little bit. I needed a break because, again, I knew that environment wasn't healthy for me and something in my spirit was really collapsing. I was experiencing not chronic illness symptoms at that time, but very intense nightmares and energetic disturbances. I'd be in public and feel a lot of dark energies. The spiritual world was kind of melding with my everyday waking experience in a way that felt very traumatic and unsafe. So I went to Peru, and a lot of redirections occurred to introduce me to my teacher. I wasn't supposed to be in the place and time when I met him. Yeah. I was introduced to the Shipibo lineage, and how I was introduced was by some people I was working with, and that this was a maestro, or that means master or teacher, who they really trusted. And that's something really, really important when we step into this space with anyone, is to have, strong referrals that this person can be trusted. Because when we enter into deep work, we're opening ourselves on so many layers. And so I decided to meet this maestro and to see how I felt in his presence. And when I met him, something really deep in me began to relax. And I just remember being really close to tears because something about him felt incredibly safe. And something I want to mention about working in lineage, and especially the Shipibo lineage, is that the training starts from a very very young age. And these shamans are doctors. They're performing energetic surgery in such a profound way that is radically different from how the modern world is touching the work with these plants or psychedelics. And something in me sensed that I was here to experience this way of healing and awakening. There was something in me that, at the time I had no logical conception of anything that I'm sharing about the Shipibo lineage. I didn't really know anything about them. Something in me knew that I was safe there and I was going to be guided in a really clear, deep way. And that meant a
Yeah.
lot.
Shipibo is one of the lineages that works with ayahuasca. Are there many? I don't know the context of Shipibo. I've heard it for sure, but I don't
Mhm.
know what the other options are.
Yeah, there's many different traditions, and ayahuasca is traditionally grown in the Amazon jungle. So the Shipibo tribe are people who live in what we call Peru today, but yeah, the Amazon spans across different countries. So there's some of the tribes who I've either sat with or studied from in some way include the Inga and Siona, which is a tribe from the Putumayo region of Colombia, the Icofan peoples of Ecuador, the Hunikuan and Yawanawa tribes of Brazil. And every tribe has their own tradition with these plants. And when we talk about ayahuasca, ayahuasca is a vine and a leaf made into a tea. So that's one singular experience. But actually, there's a whole ecology and cosmovision surrounding the kingdom of the plants and communication with them. So every tribe kind of has their own beautiful flavor and way. And something that is unique about the Shipibo tribe is how they study and how they work. So they're very much doctors, they're medicos. The apprenticeship is really a lifelong apprenticeship, but there comes a point when someone decides that they want to learn. And if you're not Shipibo, you will find a maestra or maestro to open a special apprenticeship channel for you, a special transmission. If you are Shipibo, you go to your parents or your grandparents and you share, I want to learn. And this shamanic container called the Sama is opened. And in Spanish and English, it's known as the master plant dieta. So it's called a diet. It has a little bit to do with food, but it has a lot more to do with energy. And in this time, you partner with a plant. There's a lot of restrictions and what you can eat and your lifestyle. And you begin to attune to these very subtle, etheric layers of the plant spirit. And the plant spirit pours through you in this time, and your own spirit begins to merge with these in the plant that you're working with. And something not well known in by people outside of the Shipibo tradition is that there's two types of master plant dietas. So there's the dieta to heal yourself. And it's, really the shamanic container that's opened by a shaman, a maestro or maestra, to support you in healing. And then there's the apprenticeship dieta, which is a different transmission that's given with the same plants, actually, it can be. And it's in that process of the apprenticeship that you learn to sing. And these songs are called Icaros, and they're channeled songs and transmissions that are actually an energetic surgery. And so when a maestra or maestro is sitting in front of you in a ceremony, they can see inside your body, and just through their concentration, their consciousness, and their expression of vibration through song, a channeling of these plants that they've studied so deeply with over their lives, they are able to support this transformation inside of your energy system.
Wow. I know there are some people who practice it who say that they've studied in the lineage, and the way that you're describing it, I think is different. I think it's different than a lot of people claim to have worked with the Shipibo, and from my own personal experience, it's like, I don't know, it's different to be able to do this type of energetic surgery that you're talking about, to be able to really see inside someone. That's feels like a gift, but if you work deeply enough with the plant as you are, is that something that anyone who's truly called to it could develop, or is it meant for certain people?
Yeah, it's such an interesting question. As a white woman, not indigenous Shipibo or any other lineage that has worked with these plants for thousands of years, it's something I've also really considered seriously in myself and have asked my teacher about his response to me. And, he doesn't speak for all Shipibo people or all indigenous people working with the plants by any means. His response to me has always been, if you have a clear heart and a clear mind and you're willing to study, and it's not an easy decision to decide that because the path is really long and hard, then I'll teach you. And
Mm.
so what the path of apprenticeship has looked like isn't just going to a few ayahuasca retreats and saying I studied with the Shipibo people. It's been years and years of deep sacrifice. So giving up sex, salt, sugar, oil, spicy
Salt?
food. Yeah. No salt. Yeah,
Wow.
any food with, a lot of taste. So that's the food, the lifestyle, needing to become a hermit, needing to actually devote my entire self. It's meant sacrificing relationships and shedding a lot in my life that was no longer aligned with the maestra inside of me. It's meant, showing myself to myself in radically scary ways, going through a lot of pain, discomfort, purging, vomiting, diarrhea, sweating, countless years going through that.
Wow. So how many years have you been on this path for?
Yeah, I've been working with my Shipibo maestro, Pablo, for about 9 years. I'm about to open my 10th long process master plant dieta. So I actually leave tomorrow for Peru and will open this process Monday. So I've been in preparation myself for over a month now. Yeah. And my longest master plant dieta was a year and a half consecutively. And months of that time spent in the jungle.
Can you describe to us what is it like to experience the medicine for those that ayahuasca is something that is totally new to them and have no idea? What does it look like?
Yeah, there's the the journey can look many different ways. The plants have their own consciousness, and ayahuasca as a doctor is working with us in her own way that sometimes to our human selves doesn't make sense. So sometimes you can drink a medicine and there's no perceivable effect. What's happening, however, is that the medicine is in your system and she's working with you on a different level. And I've heard this described by different shamans in a few different ways. One of the reasons is because she's diagnosing you and there's a lot of blockages there. So she's just beginning to go in and meet your energy and see where to go first. Another reasoning might be that she is working with some parts that are so deep and ancient that it would be so incredibly painful to feel. And so the medicine is working in this way that you cannot perceivably feel. I wouldn't say that this is very common, but it can happen. And it can happen to people who are new to drinking ayahuasca, and it can also happen at some point on the path. Usually the common experience with ayahuasca is that many geometries begin to open, sacred geometries, and you begin to be pulled somewhere in your body that is very blocked in some way. And something that we can always remember is, once we've made a choice for ourselves to choose a vision for ourselves, like this intention, choose a life that we want to walk through in this world, that the plants are already helping us to come into that vision. So whatever pieces show themselves and reveal on a journey are somehow connected to that vision, even if it feels very random. Sometimes we can experience opening of pure emotion in our body, fear or sadness or grief. We can experience different visions of spirits or implants or different things that are lodged into our energy bodies that have been making us sick and making us suffer. And the plants, they help us to go in and to purge this and to remove it. And by purge, it's really like a processing of that energy and an alchemizing of the energy. You might physically vomit, you might have diarrhea, you might sweat, you might cry, you might laugh, you might breathe. There's so many ways that our nervous systems can release. You can yawn. And sometimes what emerges is this like it's this alchemy, this like physical discharge of something that we can see also on a very spiritual level. We can also go on journeys. We can be flying, experiencing different worlds, meeting different beings, meeting parts of ourselves that we felt have been very lost and locked away. We can experience animals and plants and deep, deep knowings and downloads in ourselves. And really, no journey looks the same. Sometimes there's very bright, vivid colors. Other times it's deep knowings that emerge inside of us. There's this incredible transformation that happens in alliance with these plants.
I have a personal question. So I have sat with her 3 times just over a long weekend. And I never really talked to someone, certainly not someone who has the experience that you have, about the first night. I went in with a grand intention of remove my fear. And it was this like really big thing. And the first night, it was terrifying. It
Mm-hmm.
was, the beginning was wonderful. It showed me all this light and joy, and I was having this uncontrollable laughter come out of me. It was like, oh my God, I felt more love than I ever have in my entire life. And it was, I heard this, or this knowing, I guess, maybe it was a voice, I don't really remember. Remember that this is what you are. Remember this is what you are. And then it just went dark, like so dark. I felt like, and I'm curious if you have any insight on this, I went to what felt like a dark realm. It was just blackness. And it felt like, I don't know if it was my soul, my spirit, my consciousness was on this taffy pole that was constantly just being pulled like that.
Mm-hmm.
And the feeling that I had was that this is the realm that souls or consciousness get stuck in if they disconnect from their body.
Mm-hmm.
Does any of that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Anything you have to say there?
There's so much wisdom in these incredibly challenging and painful and dark experiences. Something that my teacher even reminds me of now, after who knows how many ceremonies, because I don't keep track, but hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of
Yeah.
ceremonies. I I still receive this reminder. If it was beautiful all the time, we wouldn't learn anything. And
Mm.
just like life, the medicine isn't beautiful all the time. What is important in those moments is your concentration and your decision. You decide to move towards the light, to bring your focus back to God and to see through, whatever is occurring there, because the medicine, the plants, they test us. And in the end, of course, it's just me testing me. In the end, all I'm going to find in that test is myself. But the plants are going to show us things that are very hard sometimes and are very dark and very what we might judge as ugly and uncomfortable and wrong. There's different parts to this. Part of that can sometimes be the cleanliness of the space. So making sure that you're working with people who are working with tobacco and really keeping the space very clean. So that's one possible layer. Another possible layer is to show you that even in those dark moments, uh, you are the light, and your awareness is the light. And, something else that we can go through is if there are, attachments or ancestors who we're connected to their consciousness, we can experience what that consciousness is experiencing, and that can feel very dark and slimy and scary, or even the inner child. So sometimes it's metaphor, sometimes it's real. But in the end, I always in myself come back to Course in Miracles at the very beginning. There's a quote: "What is real can not be threatened. What is unreal does not exist, and therein lies the peace of God."
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. During that moment of dark, no, not moment. I mean, I was stuck in it until the sun rose. I
Mhm.
don't think that I was in the best environment. I don't
Mhm.
think that the people that were facilitating things were necessarily in full integrity, because I was stuck and I couldn't communicate that I couldn't get out.
Mhm.
I couldn't open my mouth, couldn't move other than just rubbing my knees together. It felt like there were spider webs that were covering my eyes, that I couldn't even open my eyelids. It was like they were sewn shut, but I would get a glimpse of the fire, and it was just remembering the light that
Mhm.
kept me going. And then finally when the sun rose and the light started to come in, that's when I was like, "Oh, I'm okay." And I felt like I'm going to get through this. I just have to, something is happening. I don't know what it was, but the light really felt like it saved me. I remember for days afterwards, the sunlight, it's almost like bringing me to tears now. I was like, thank God for the sun. Like the sun is, in that moment, coming from a Christian background, I was like, the sun is the savior. The
Mhm.
sun like felt like it saved me right there.
Mhm.
So incredible experience, terrifying experience. And the next 2 nights were, journeys in themselves, really fascinating. And at the same time, it made me very much respect the medicine, the process. And after that, I said, I don't think that I'll ever recommend this to anyone.
Mhm.
I really feel like if someone's going to work with it, I don't know if I need to caution them, like, buckle up, because this is not an easy thing. This is going to really, really challenge you, perhaps harder than anything else ever could.
Mhm.
Uh, just a whole different level of respect for it.
Yeah, the container is such an important part that you mentioned. I look back and I perhaps was one of those people who was like so unprepared for my first ceremony in where I was at the time. Now it's like it's very different. There was no one before I went into ceremony really giving me tools about how I could calm my mind and feel safe inside of myself if something was scary. Yeah, the first few ceremonies that I had were incredibly dark. Like I would see like this like little pinprick of light and try to go there. And it was so dark. And people, after the first ceremony, I was like, I don't think I can do this again. And then people were like, I was with Jesus and Buddha and disco party with Krishna. and,
Yeah.
and I was like, what? I was in hell.
Yes.
and,
Yes.
yeah.
I
Mhm.
literally, when I was there, I was like, this is hell. And this is way worse than I ever imagined hell could be. Forget
Mhm.
fire. This
Mhm.
is the worst thing that could ever
Mhm.
possibly exist.
For me, I think it's very different in case and environment specific. For me, I was able to recognize that it was like a black box inside of my mind, like like pilots
Yes.
record, and all of it was kind of like trauma and who knows what was recorded there, and the medicine began to open that box of all of these feelings that I had locked away. And yeah, for me, it was also like an exorcism, really experiencing what other beings were experiencing in life as, a channel and a medium. I had quite infiltrated channel that had made me very sick. And so, really going through and cleaning all of that. But I would say there's something in both of us that even after that experience, we went back in,
Yeah.
and um, that there's like this holding and wisdom in the medicine that I didn't really know how to understand at that time, but there was something guiding me. And even beyond like the medicine, when we zoom out and look at each soul's path here in life and each soul's process, like this life is going to hurt and it's going to be beautiful and horrible and awesome in so many ways. And the medicine can really open us to like what is beyond the identification in all of the suffering and the pain. The medicine can help us liberate that inside of ourselves.
Truly. I feel like it definitely helped me with that. I assume that it's always what you need. You can't control necessarily what the medicine gives you.
Yes, in my sense. And I think it's also, very complex. There's many layers to this. We can't control what we receive there at all. And in fact, if we try to push away an experience, it will likely come back louder and more intense. What we receive there in terms of the cleansing, this is a limpieza. It's a cleansing, and this is very much in these traditions. It's understood that the plants they're washing us from these energies and discharging. And it's, this very surgical process of cleaning with ayahuasca and the master plants. So if we try to reject that experience, we're exiling, a part of ourself in suffering. And the medicine will continue to bring those parts forward until we recognize, oh yeah, like it's being shown to me. I asked for this because it's related to my intention. So I have the capacity to be with this and to open to it. And she's helping us to reach this authentic desire in ourselves to live in alignment, to live in our liberation. What she reveals to us can be very, very challenging. But if you go into ceremony with the right training and preparation for your mind, you're able to deeply learn from the experience and to emerge from that ceremony very free and light and clear inside of yourself. People's eyes completely change just after one ceremony. How you carry yourself, like your whole aura just shifts.
How is it for you?
I have a very humbling sense of self on this path. I find that the more that I study and learn, the more that I realize how little I know. I sing Icaros, and that channel has been opened for me. Every single time I'm in this experience, I'm learning light years in what I do, being able to sing in this language and having this channel open and to be able to support people in ways that both they and I didn't know were possible, is such a blessing. And it's so radical to be walking in this way.
Are you able What is that like? Like, can you see the most radical things going on inside of someone?
Yeah, I mean, this path is really a training in concentration. It's a disentangling of the mind and perception so that you can become a very clear vessel for these master plants. And so it's different, every time that I work. And also, it's different every single time I receive Icaros from my own teacher. It's like my own consciousness expanding more and more, like the light beginning to shine through, that I can see what he's doing. And he told me something a lot of years ago because I was beginning to work with him after having come from other traditions. And he told me, until you open an apprenticeship master plant diet, when you're in ayahuasca, you'll be able to see, but you'll never be able to do and, and to act. And I had no idea what that meant. And over the years, in this path, I've been so just in wonder to discover what that means, and inside of my own mind to be able to form perform acts of consciousness and to be able to use my voice to very deeply work with different parts of people. So there's different types of Icaros, but when we sit in front of someone, we begin to work with their vibration and the coherence. And it's not sage deciding really to do anything inside of anyone. It's this state of consciousness that is very expanded and very still, and at the same time shifting and understanding many pieces and parts all at once. And through there, the master plants begin to direct sound and energy and intention through my own body. If you see behind me, this is called kene. These are geometries that are apparent in the medicine of our energetic field. And so through cymatics, which is the visualization, the study of sound, if you've ever seen like sand vibrating on a plate, you can see different frequencies vibrate different patterns. And coherent frequencies vibrate beautiful patterns like that. So these are the patterns that Icaros makes, and coherence and beauty and all of these qualities of connecting to God and spirit. That's coherence. And then when there's some type of discordance or sickness in someone's field, it appears like very discordant and can look many ways. You have different visions we can get from the medicine. Sometimes we can see spirits and entities. Sometimes you can see the inner children and the lost children. But every single experience singing to someone is very different, even the same person.
Would you say that ayahuasca is something that everyone is meant to work with? Or how can you know if you are meant to work with her?
Beyond physical and psychological contraindications, of course, and medications that are contraindicated. If someone wants to work with ayahuasca, this is only a decision that they can make inside of themselves. And if that decision is arising inside of someone, what I usually recommend is to really sit with that decision in your heart. And it's okay if there's fear there. In fact, there probably will be fear there, and that's really normal. It might be more of a concern if there's no fear at all. I think very often on this path, people are working with the medicine and then they open up and they're like, oh my God, everybody needs to do this. The politicians need to do this. Like my family, my parents need to do this. That's coming from a really pure impulse inside of us. Like we want the world to live in freedom and awakening and understanding of who we are and our purpose here in life. And at the same time, each soul has their own sovereignty, their own free will, their own decision of awakening and choosing healing for themselves. What I usually encourage people to do is just to live your example, because when you live the example, you're showing people that there's a path to freedom. We're in this time right now of such crisis and uncertainty, and people are seeking a way home to themselves and a way to strengthen themselves in the face of this uncertainty. And the plants can be allies for us on that path. But it's always important to remember, like, only you can make that decision for yourself. Even if a plant calls you, in the end, it's you making that decision for yourself. And that's why it's meaningful, because that decision is going to hone your decision to stay conscious when you're in ceremony and in life afterwards.
Yeah, that's important. I have heard a number, maybe even like countless people say, if you're meant to work with her, she will call you. But I really respect and I appreciate your guidance that it's you choosing ultimately. And it's how you go into it, the way that you prepare before going into ceremony, and how you continue to hold yourself and the example that you are afterwards as well that is really powerful.
Yeah, and there's many, many little decisions that go into the preparation process that are very significant. Choosing to meditate, choosing to follow the preparation diet where we don't consume many foods, and even foods, some of them that are very healthy for our bodies. And there's a point why we're doing all of that. And one of the reasons is that it is very much honing your sovereignty over your mind, showing you that you're more than those urges.
Honing your sovereignty over your mind. That's gold right there. That alone can shift a lot. As you look back at your life, the journey that you've been on, the Lyme, the trauma, trying to fit into the finance world, and then finding ayahuasca or ayahuasca finding you, the two coming together. How has your perspective on life shifted when you look back?
Yeah, one of the ways I like to feel it is I used to think life was a battle, and just very unconsciously, I felt so unsafe in life. I was terrified and was always sensing a lack of love, or that I had to fight or prove myself for love. In some way, there's like a scarcity of love. Now I can understand. One of my favorite quotes is by Florence Scovel Shinn, and she says, if life is a game, if you think life is a battle, you just don't know the rules of the game. And so I feel like that's kind of the reality I'm walking in now, that life is sacred and the world is quite neutral. It's really what I perceive and decide to do with those perceptions inside that make it a battle or a joy to walk through. And my understanding, my own cosmovision, my soul's purpose, or better said, purpose here as soul, is to be able to share in this love, to feel safe in this love. And, my own being is moving from always being in fear to actually being in trust with life, trust financially, in relationships, in my work, in my practice. If I do encounter those hellish experiences in our journey somewhere in life, that God is holding me. God is not separate from this. God is the air I'm breathing, and God is the thoughts in my mind, and God is moving through my own free will and my decision to stay conscious and to see through the gaze of my soul and to see love in the world.
If there are people who are in the darkness right now, whether they are craving some sort of spiritual awakening or they're newer on their path and they're really having a rough time right now, what advice would you give to them?
Yeah, the advice that I would like to share is that you're not alone, and these burdens that we hold, we can remember to place them into the hands of God and the arms of love, and to feel that support and connection with us always. One of the symptoms of losing that cosmovision, of understanding who we are in the world, is to lose our sense of connection, both to ourselves and to all of the benevolent guiding forces that are with us. So place your feet on the earth to feel Earth's heartbeat, to breathe with Earth, to feel the sunshine on your face, and to see the colors in the environment around, to remember to recognize beyond the cage of the mind, there's freedom here and there's life. And all of this is part of life. I'm alive, not just these thoughts or this suffering. I am really this entire experience that is breathing and weaving and playing. And all we have to do is remember to be in communication, to ask for help from the universe and from love.
Thank you, Sage. If
Mhm.
people want to connect with you, how can they do that?
Yeah, my Instagram is at rise with period sage, and my website is Illumina, Ilumina soul.com.
Wonderful. I'll put those details in the show notes. I wish we could go on forever. I have so much that I want to talk to you about. This was really rich. And as we've been talking, I feel like there have been a few times where I have just gotten lost in your eyes, just watching you, and everything else kind of fades away. It's been magnificent. So thank you so much for sharing your journey, your love, and your wisdom with us. This was marvelous.
Thank you so much, Carlyn, for all of this beautiful service that you're offering everyone by sharing these stories.
Thank you so much for listening. One last thing I wanted to mention is that Sage is hosting a retreat in Portugal, September 2026. So, if you felt the call to work with the medicine, this could be your opportunity. There's a link for it down in the description. There's also the other links to connect with her, so check those out. And again, if you do feel the call to work with this medicine, please make sure that you're working with someone who is in integrity, who has learned direct from the lineages, who has devoted their life to this, and creates a safe environment, not just someone who perhaps looks the part or knows the language. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with someone who you think also might enjoy it, and we'll see you on the next one.